Coming to you from high atop art studios in the San Francisco Bay Area, you're listening to TechMove. This is episode 51. Today's show is our 2022 NAB show and wrap-up. We're packed with interviews from Panasonic, Blackmagic, and Aperture. Plus, we have updates on our experiences with the new Mac Studio machines. I'm Rod Louie, and with me is Keith Moreau. Get ready. It's time for another exciting episode of TechMove. Let's go! Well, welcome back, everyone, to TechMove. And as we promised you earlier in the show, that this was going to be our very special 2022 NAB show episode. The great Keith Moreau was able to head out to Las Vegas late April of 2022 to go to the NAB show. And Keith, how was the show? I think it was like the first real show in like a couple of years, isn't that right?
Yeah, I think it was actually 3 years. The last one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Man.
this was the first show in 3 years. The last one was 2019.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Around the same time of year, like April-ish. So,
right.
Yeah.
Because it was just about, this part of the year where COVID was really taking hold and stuff like that. And that was really in 2019, 20.
Yeah,
I think it was 2020 really was the height of it. So, yeah, you might have just gotten away with getting to that last show there.
Yeah, so in like March 18th of 2020 is when the COVID lockdown started.
Yep.
And like even a week before that, everybody was going, "Oh, it's just going to blow over." And then and I already signed up for NAB and, plane tickets and hotels and everything for NAB and event that was also kind of going to be around April. Another recording, like paid recording event I needed to do, or was booked to do, and that was canceled a little bit before the NAB was actually canceled. Because NAB was canceled pretty late. It was canceled like early April.
Oh, so kind of a last minute thing?
It was a last minute thing, which I think for me it was not great, financially, because I think I got all my money back, and I think I got some worthless airline credits.
To use at a later date, but use it within the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, use it at a later date, but then they don't seem to want to give you like real plane tickets. They want to give you like really cheapo plane tickets.
Vouchers.
Yeah, vouchers that aren't good for a lot.
Right.
So I think I lost money on that. But anyway, so this happened at the last minute, and it was really disappointing. Just in general, I mean, COVID was so disappointing for everybody in a lot of different ways, but that was just at the last minute, so it was especially disappointing. But anyway, and then the next year came around, and they were actually going to do it in 2021 in September.
Yes.
And that was canceled too at the last minute.
Wow. Yeah.
There was also, but I just decided to go to Las Vegas anyway, just for a vacation. So I didn't cancel all my accommodations. I just didn't go to the non-existent show.
Right.
So, yeah. And then this year, 2022, finally it reappeared. And apparently, COVID does not exist in Las Vegas.
Right. Not because now. Yes.
Nobody, like absolutely nobody was wearing a mask. I mean, there might have been a couple people. Most of them, I think, were like Asian.
Yes.
But other than that, 99.99% of the people there, all the vendors, all the participants, every single person did not wear a mask.
And packed in like sardines too, I'll bet.
Yeah, it wasn't. My experience was it wasn't super, super, super crowded like some of the NABs, but I didn't actually go right at the show opening. I was actually there a couple days late just because of my schedule. So I didn't go to the first 2 days of it. I went to the last 2 days.
Which is usually like the most attended part of the show, right? The first couple of days.
Yeah, usually the opening is just super packed because everyone wants to see all the new stuff right away.
Right.
They don't want to hear the news later. They want to just get it. And so I wasn't there for that part, so I don't know how crowded it was. And so when I went, it was not empty, but
Mhm.
it wasn't so packed that it was uncomfortable. It was okay.
Right.
Yeah.
What how did you feel about the number of vendors that were at NAB this year?
I felt that there definitely were less. There were less, and I think there were some people that planned to go and they didn't go at the last minute, maybe
Ah,
because they didn't want to get messed up again.
right.
And then some of them seem to have had contingencies where they would just combine with another booth. I'll give you an example. DJI, which usually has a gigantic presence there
Yep.
because they have all these gimbals and they have all these drones and maybe other miscellaneous things. They usually have a huge presence at the last shows I've been to, and you couldn't even find them there. I think they had one little section inside of the B&H pavilion or booth, which really wasn't that big. So that's an example of a company that just didn't.
Especially DJI, huh?
Yeah. And that was kind of interesting because they're always coming out with new stuff. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think they did have something there, like if you planned it, but it wasn't as massive as it usually was because I pretty much missed it. I think I saw a couple drones in the B&H booth and then didn't really have time to investigate it. So yes, but that's an example. And other big ones had smaller booths. I think Adamus usually has a massive booth with like a circus show going on in it,
Right.
and they didn't have that this year. So yeah, it was definitely smaller. I think the convention Las Vegas Convention Center is vast, and there's 3 different halls. There's the North Hall, where I think a lot of the seminars and things like that, more like classroom type stuff, happens in the North Hall. It's more like a office building, but
Yep.
there's also exhibits there too. And then there's the Central Hall, which is really primarily where a lot of the stuff we like is there. A lot
Mhm.
of the actions there. And then there's the South Hall, which has 2 floors actually. So it's super massive. The South Hall wasn't even open for the show. So like
Oh.
I think half of the capacity wasn't even filled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
so that really does show that the amount of vendors were not there
I think it was
as
less.
in regular.
Yeah.
Wow.
I haven't looked at the stats, but I'm pretty sure it was less. It was fine for me because I wasn't there for very long, so it was in a way made it easier for me to see every square foot of the whole thing quickly.
I remember in years past when we would do our annual NAB shows here on TechMove that it would be sometimes difficult to get people to get on camera to do interviews just because of time constraints, number of people that were there, all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How did you feel this year with what interviews we were able to get this year?
I felt like if I felt like if I felt really wanted to, I probably could have pressed and gotten some interviews with pretty much anybody I wanted. It didn't seem like it was overly crowded.
Hmm.
It seemed like by the time I was there, I think they were starting to peter out, so there wasn't a huge rush because all the real hardcore tech news people had already probably been there and done their reviews or done their interviews. But yeah, I mean, Magic is really hard to get into initially, but I just went up to the press area in the back of it, and talked to a press specialist there, and got it set up within about 10 minutes.
That's good. Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. So
Sometimes,
so quite a bit easier than in years past.
yeah, that was easy. And I mean, I didn't do that many interviews this year just because I wasn't interested in a bunch of stuff
Right.
that was there. I think just in general, this year's NAB wasn't super exciting in that regard. There wasn't a lot of brand new, amazing stuff. It was maybe incremental. But I think because NAB shoes are not where the vendors that we are interested in release their big news. They used to do that, like several years ago. They used to
Yep.
have brand new products coming out in NAB, but now I think they're so uncertain that they don't want to wait for it, and they just release it whenever they want and whenever it's convenient for them.
I am wondering if supply chain issues, that are worldwide right now have anything to do with that. Where it's
Yeah.
like, we used to, everybody used to target NAB or, let's get to Cinegear or something like that.
Yeah.
But with, all the quote unquote supply chain issues that are rampant in the news right now, if that has anything to do with maybe lack of exciting things that are coming out. I mean, literally the most exciting thing we've had over the last year has been like the Mac Studio, right? And they're
Yeah.
not exactly announcing that at NAB. So
No. Yeah. At least in the camera area, there's been some pretty cool stuff in the last few years.
yeah,
But
oh, yeah.
but it just this NAB didn't have, in my opinion, didn't have it. But that's okay.
And they just seem to be releasing it like when they want to
Yeah.
off their website or making some sort of, Instagram announcement, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's fine. It was still really fun to go, and going to Las Vegas was really interesting. I actually went there, like I think I'd said there was an NAB planned for September of 2021, and I've been there fairly recently to Las Vegas, and but it's always fun to go to Las Vegas. And then this year, because there's no COVID, haha, it was even more fun.
Right. He's breathing on people
Yeah,
and
all the breathing.
and all. Right. No, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did that. That's very good.
But we got tests afterwards, and luckily we didn't. So, but
That's great.
Testing
No,
myself
good.
all the time.
Yeah, no good news.
But yeah. So, but it was still fun to be there. It was really like kind of nostalgic, and so yeah. So I had fun.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, we have a few fantastic interviews that Keith was able to conduct while being on the NAB floor this year in Las Vegas. And we'd like to share that with you. And but let's do this, Keith. Let's take a quick timeout. We want to check out a couple of our recordings here in the background because we are trying some new technology here. And we're hoping that you can hear us okay,
Yeah.
and that I'm not sounding personally coming from a tunnel or some sort of escape pod of some sort. So, Keith, let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and then we will come back with our first of many interviews from NAB. Shall we do that?
Yes.
Sounds great. Okay, we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen, with more TechMove. It's TechMove in our continuing coverage of NAB 2022, and we have the pleasure of visiting with a company that we have interviewed over the last several years of NAB, and this is the fine folks over at Aperture. And Keith, our man on the street, was able to get hold of Brady Bissett, who was good enough to be able to spend some time with us. So, Keith, what over at Aperture were you looking at, or what was interesting you from those fine folks?
Well, I actually have a bunch of Aperture products. They make great lights.
Yep.
And I really have fun. In the past, I've interviewed Ted Sim, who's now the CEO.
Oh, my, really?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, no, he's really a cool guy, and he's really personable. And even though we've only met a few times, I feel like we're friends.
Yeah.
And but unfortunately, he's getting like a business degree from Harvard Business School, so he wasn't there that day. He was actually had to take some finals or something.
Oh, such low aspirations, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, that poor guy.
Yeah.
Gee.
But yeah, so there were a couple of people left. This was actually right at the end of the show. They were about to close. So for the whole show, the last day, and so I did snag a couple of the reps there. They have, so what they do now, which is really cool, is Aperture is for these shows is hiring people that use their products that make and they're pretty good speakers and know how to talk about the tech. And so Brady is one of these people. He has a YouTube channel. He talks about. Actually, I haven't watched it yet, but I will be watching it. And he seemed very knowledgeable. We talked a little after the interview. Anyway, he was a great guy. He knows about the products. He knows about lighting, and it was a fun interview.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, okay, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and go with our interview with Brady Bissett over at Aperture, along with our very own Keith Moreau on our NAB coverage right here on TechMove.
We've got Brady Bissett here from Aputure, and Aputure is a mostly lighting company. And Brady's actually an ambassador for Aputure. So not only does he work for Aputure, but he also has his own career. So we're going to talk with Brady a bit about Aputure products, some of the stuff he's excited about as a DP, and then stuff about his own career. Hey, Brady.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for chatting, talking to me here. I love it. I love being here. I'm a gear nerd myself, so it's a good place to be.
Awesome. How long have you been here in this booth?
So as far as this week goes, I have been here since, when did NAB start? Sunday? I got here Saturday. So I've been here Saturday, and we've been running around, having fun, meeting people. I like talking. It's fun.
How long have you been involved with Aputure?
With Aperture, I started a partnership. So I run a YouTube channel for cinematography and educational stuff. So I started working with them probably about January of 2021. Just working on like a YouTube partnership. And then as of a few months ago, I was introduced as Aperture ambassador as well. So I'd say a year and a half I've been working with them.
What's your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel is my name, so it's Brady Bissett. And a lot of lighting, but cinematography. I do some color grading, really anything educational. I like to teach. I learned via online, social media, in person. I wanted to extend that to anybody else who's trying to learn as well.
That's awesome. So what's some of the Aputure products that you're personally excited about?
All of them. It seems like every few weeks they're coming out with something new. So, I mean, there's a lot. There's definitely the 600D Pro I use very frequently. So that's one of my go-to kits because it's the most diverse with modular lighting. The 1200D Pro obviously excites me because it's just an absolute beast. And of course the 600C Color Pro, which includes the RGBWW, which you'll see in the Nova, all in a chip in a 600D kind of form factor with modular lighting. All three of those are fantastic, but then on the other side of the spectrum with the Amaran releases with the flexible lights and the tube lights as well, focus on the flexible lights. I use those all the time because the form factor and affordability for them is fantastic. And it's pretty much the same color science as the RGBWW Nova in the flexible light as well. Super lightweight, you can really throw it anywhere, and that's what I love about it.
So you like the 600D Pro. I personally have the 300D. I think when I got that had just come out. And have you used the 300?
The 300D? Yeah, so I use the 300D pretty frequently as well. When I know I don't need 600 power, I'll resort to the 300D. But if I'm ever, unsure about it, just for safety's sake, I'll just go towards the 600. A lot easier to switch out settings rather than a whole light.
Yeah, it's easier to turn down a 600D rather than maybe adding another light to the 300.
Exactly.
So tell me situation where you might use the 600.
Every. So a lot of the times I'll use the 600D as a hard light, like creating texture on the background with a spotlight mount. And then I can put a gobo through it, create texture as well. Always use that. But then other times when I know I want to really get a soft source of light, double diffuse it, either bounce light, book light, you're still going to have the output with the 600D power to make that light soft, even cutting through layers of diffusion.
What type of, I think I actually, do I have a softbox for that? Yeah, I think I have a softbox. I don't know if I have an Aperture softbox because when I was interested in this one, their softboxes were kind of hard to set up. Are their softboxes a little bit more flexible and quick now?
Oh yeah, so the first model, it was the one where you kind of have to stick in the 4 foundation ones and then stick in all the prongs additionally. But now it's to the point where it's just, you pop it, it's got a little tab, it clicks into place, so you can just pop it in, build the frame up in 5 seconds really. So, and the nice thing about it is it's the Bowens mount modifiers. So Bowens mount's pretty universal, it's not just proprietary to Aputure. every brand is going to make some sort of bonus mount adapter. So if you already have that and you're making the change, it makes it easy.
So you talked about gobos. What type of gobos do you use and why? And go into that a little bit.
Yeah, the two common ones I'll use are either a window frame with like either the blinds or the cross members, because that just creates a natural window look. Or additionally, if I'm cutting through somewhere where a window wouldn't make sense, sometimes I'll just get one that has like brush or little like holes for texture to make it feel like the sun's coming through a tree, out through a window or outside, and hitting on the wall. Because if you just have open flat source, you're not adding texture as much, you're just adding another bright area where the eye might go. So to cut up that and break up and add contrast, you can add something like a gobo with really whatever texture fits the environment. But those are the two that I really like to resort to.
And is there a focus ability so you can soften the edges of the gobo?
Oh yeah, so that's the great thing about the spotlight mount is you can adjust it ultimately like you're pulling focus on a lens, make the edges sharp, make the edges soft, make it feel really natural and appropriate.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we're in this section here. We have the 600 here. I think we have the 12? No.
1200D?
Yeah.
Correct.
And then there's in the back, is there a 2400 or something?
No, so right now the 1200 is the flagship, the brightest, often referred to or compared to rather to the M18. That's our brightest right now, but then we're surrounded by a lot of relatively new ones. The 600C was just released on Monday at NAB, which is the color version of the 600D. So we got a lot to work with right around here.
Okay, prices?
Prices for which one are we looking at?
Well, I'm looking at, just to compare maybe this one, comparing the 300, the old 300, which I guess is the one I have. I think I have the D1, the 600, which is a brighter version of the 300.
Yeah, so exactly. So the price points for the 600D Pro is $1,890, but they also have the 600D version, which is not Pro, which is right around the $1,300 range. Don't quote me on that, somewhere in that range. And then the $949 for the 300D, and then we're looking at for the 1200D $3,400. But again, that's the flagship, the bright light to be used on large productions.
You do you aim some of these through windows to simulate sunlight?
Yeah, so the 300D definitely, in a lot of case scenarios, will probably be great for going through windows. Granted, if you're battling sunlight that's already existing outside, you got to stop down the camera. That's when the 300D might not have the power for it. Coming over to the 600D, that's like 95% of the time is definitely enough. There's just that one time when the 1200D is great for punching light through windows on bright days, especially if you're throwing it really far. Because as light travels, it's going to dissipate and weaken. So sometimes you'll need something a little bit stronger.
Okay, so you've been at DP for how long?
Been at DP for about 3 or 4 years now. Definitely, I started with photography 12 years ago, so I've definitely always had a camera in my hand. I made a transition to video 5 or 6 years ago, and then as a DP and as learning about cinematography came around, that's when I made that transition.
So have you used old style tungsten type lights?
Not too frequently. I came around in a time when LEDs really started booming, so as my budget matched up with that growing LED budget, I kind of rode that wave as it came. So not too frequently I'm using any tungstens or HMIs or anything like that.
So I came from the tungsten era, so the fact that these even exist, that they're so lightweight, low power, you could power them by batteries even if you're not in a situation where you can plug in, is pretty amazing. Just that jump in technology.
Yeah, and that's something that Ted Sim, as he created this, everybody said you can't do modular lighting, you can't do LED lighting, like that just doesn't exist, it doesn't work that way. And now here we are 7-8 years later, and these are very integrated in the industry, very integrated in the YouTube content creator world, all through and through, and very much point proven that you can use them with LED, with modular lighting.
Okay, tell me a little bit about your channel, some things that are interesting about you and your career, and how you approach not only lighting, but maybe film gear, stuff like that.
So I have a very creative kind of style, I guess, in a sense of I like to exaggerate whatever emotion or mood or feeling. So I tend to go towards really like playing with lighting and painting with light and adding it in. So on my channel, I like to add or really extend that in teaching form, because I like to teach and I like to educate. YouTube is a fantastic resource. So that's kind of the direction I went to with my channel, is say, well, there's a little me that was 13 years old that's fiending to learn everything that's out there. I want to be a resource for him or her that's out there. So that's where I really started that, and from there I just really try to think of practical usage, not as much the tech side of things, but really how do I use this and why. The why is the important, because I could say you're going to put this light through diffusion, put it through the window, blah blah blah, it's going to look like this, but if they don't know why, they can't apply it to their own workflow. So knowing the why, you put the hard light through because it creates a sunset feel, you soft light because it's more pleasing. That makes sense. When I'm on this shoot, I can do that and it makes sense.
Tell me a little tip or trick that you use that anybody could do but don't really know too much about.
Oh boy, lately, it may not be the top one, but first one that came to mind, so we're going to go with that, the soft hob technique, which means, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I love using the combination of hard light and soft light. So, say I've got a light on me, I'm the subject, it's sunset. If I put a hard sunlight on me, yeah, you get sunlight texture, but my face is probably you see shadows, it won't look pleasing. So I'll like to take a layer of diffusion in front of the light and just feather it. So now my face is going to be soft, you're going to have this nice wrap, but then you get the hard light qualities across my face. And if you place it in a location somewhere right around the chest neckline, the viewer doesn't really often make that connection, that it's hard light and soft light. So that's something that I really love to do.
And how would you do that physically?
So a lot of the times there's two different options for it. I've done the simpler term, was where you've got one light source, a hard light, coming at me. And then as it's coming at me, I just take a rag, like I took half grid rag, just a floating diffusion material, and just feather it down on a frame. So I just bring it up high, and then I start to bring it down and find out where this line is coming into place. And you can do that. Additionally, if you really want to control it, you can just flag off your one light source and then bring in a different light and then shape it softly on my face as well. So I've kind of done a little bit of both. I just feel out how much output I want, how much feather I can really get.
So on your typical shoot, what's the crew size? How many people?
So I work a little bit more on, smaller, so anywhere from one-man band to myself to 10 or 15 people. Not too frequently am I on sets with 30 plus crew. Larger scale things, as of right now, obviously things change, but that's kind of where I'm at, where the good chunk of my experience and learning has come from.
Have you noticed a reduction in the crew size?
See, since I started at a point that was coming up close to the whole 2020 COVID restriction and change of everything, as I grew, it's not like I was already in on very large sets too frequently before that, and then everything changed, and now we're in a completely different dynamic. So I can't completely attest to that myself.
Well, what I've noticed is with the smaller lighting gear, with the lower power requirements, it seems like you can get away with fewer people.
Exactly. You don't need somebody out there manning everything. The amount of times I throw these up all on my own, throw them on a stand, plug them into power, control it from my phone with the Sidus Link app. I've done so many shoots completely alone, and it's fine.
How long does it take you to set up?
I usually try to keep set up as fast as possible, but me being a very critical individual, it takes a little bit longer, but really the setup time for these aren't long. It's just a matter of dialing it in. So let's say if it's just myself, I could get the shot up and camera running in an hour from everything. Obviously, that's very subjective. Everything is different. So say I've just got a key light, it's going to take me a minute. They're very quick lights to put up. But if I'm really massaging and painting in where I want these lights, it's going to take a little bit longer, and then I'm just going to be too critical, probably hate it, probably scream, run in circles, and then fix it, and then we're good to go 4.5 hours later.
Do you feel pressure when it's taking a while because you're a perfectionist?
Yeah, I think I do. I always have that weight on my shoulders of all right, people are waiting on me. There's always this massaging balance of perfection and efficiency. So sometimes I do feel pressure. Sometimes things fall into place and I'm like, things work. But that happens 0.5% of the time.
Okay. Tell me if you can, the worst disaster story that you could think of.
See, I know it's a good thing because nothing came to mind. So that's a good thing.
Or near disaster.
It may be something just as simple as power dying. Just me not planning. And I had one shoot where I was like, yeah, a couple of VMATs will be great. They didn't last long at all. I did not anticipate that. So then you've got to improvise and figure out what you're going to do. Are you going to shut lights off? Are you going to cut lights? Whatever. So I don't have any crazy disaster stories. I did have a tube light fall. Nobody got hurt. But bringing it up on the stand, I should have secured it prior to bringing it up because it just bounced out of its little jaw clamps. No one got hurt, but you don't like lights falling on set.
That's pretty mild. Well, anyway, it's been wonderful talking with you. I love the perspective, being a pro, and also talking about this new gear. And I'll be looking for your channel.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, and it's great talking with you.
Keith Moreau signing off for TechMove.
It's TechMove in NAB 2022 and our continuing coverage, where that was Brady Bissett from Aperture, as well as our very own Keith Moreau, who was able to dive in on a lot of stuff that is Aperture. So what'd you think? You know, we've interviewed Brady and Aperture before. And, you know, they're always great guests to have on the podcast. What was your overall thought of the interview?
Oh, I thought it was really good. I wasn't that familiar that Aperture had come out with. I think one of the companies that did actually wait for NAB to announce stuff was Aperture, and they came out with some pretty amazing things. So they used to have these really super bright chip on board, COB I think it's called. Basically, it's just a huge LED chip that puts out a lot of light. You know, it's like a couple inches in diameter. And so the lights some of the bright lights that I have are the 300D2 and the 600D, I think. Since then, there's been the 600D Pro, and then I believe there's a 1200. And so they're starting to put color chips as well as so they just had a regular like white light chip in the past. That's what I have. So you have to put gels on it or whatever if you want to change the color. It's great for daylight, but if you need any other type of temperature, you have to temperature fine, but it's still a little extra trouble. Now you can just dial in whatever color you want. You know, if you want to have sunset color or you know, tungsten or cloudy day color or whatever, you just dial it in. It's all electronic now. You don't even need gels anymore.
And it looks
from
pretty
what
good.
I could see. It's hard to but I believe that they're pretty good. They have a lot of great specs, like really amazing specs. So I believe their specs.
Yeah. And they really are the leaders of that kind of thing too. So, you know, I would imagine that they've done their homework and they've done a lot of quality testing and stuff. So it's probably
I think so. I haven't watched too many reviews on their products, but I know that they are pretty truthful about what they do. And if I was in the need for a color light, I probably would just immediately buy it. They're not cheap, you know, like the Lightstorm, the LS600C is like $2,500, you know. So it's not a cheap light, but it's also a super powerful light, and it's color, you know. So it can save you a lot of time, you know, instead of just, you know, having to like put a gel in and check it and unclip the gel and, you know, do all this stuff to it. You just dial it in and it dial it of time, and very versatile. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to be doing some shoots in the next few days, and I'm just going to bring my Aperture lights and just with a nice big softbox in front of them, and very simple to set up and super bright. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's great. Great. All right. Well, hey, again, thanks to Brady Bissett from Aperture. Thanks to you, Keith, for getting us that interview. Let's take a break and let's wrap up today's show right after this break. You're listening to NAB 2022 coverage right here on TechMove. Welcome back to TechMove and the NAB 2022 special. Rod Louie and Keith Moreau with you, and Keith was able to secure a interview with the fine folks over at Blackmagic. And for selfish reasons, I asked Keith to get a interview with regards to DaVinci Resolve 18, which is the latest and greatest of Resolve. And I personally am running Resolve 17 right now and have not upgraded to 18. So I'm excited to kind of hear about what Keith finds out from the rep over at Blackmagic. Keith, thank you so much for talking to them for me and our fine listeners. Was this a fairly easy interview to get from these folks?
Yeah, it was pretty easy to get. I just went to the back, talked to the press person, and was set up within about 10 minutes.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, and the guy was really, really nice. After the interview, I can just kind of talk to you about how the difference between Blackmagic interviews and other companies that I've noticed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll be great. That'll be
Uh,
great. One other thing, I know that our interview kind of deals with a lot of DaVinci Resolve
yes.
18,
hmm
but what about the hardware aspect of Blackmagic, which is oftentimes really huge during NAB shows?
Yeah, they had a ton of setup there. It was actually kind of the same setup they've had for several years.
Okay.
But so they have a bunch of cameras lined up, um, and kind of shooting a scene, like really colorful, beautiful kind of set, and people can, and they're all on tripods with nice heads on them, and they can pan cameras and play with them, and then there's usually reps in that area to kind of talk about the cameras. This time I didn't really have time to go to that area.
Got it.
I hadn't heard any pre-show news about new announcements. I think they might have come out with a new, like a regular Ursa camera, maybe an 8K. But let me just see if I'm just gonna do like a second, just research.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting that they have the booth set up where and I always think that's a great idea to have booths up there set up for you to try some of the equipment and stuff. So I'm
Yeah,
actually pleased to hear that there's a nice set and all this kind of stuff. But if there's no real huge news for any type of new cameras or, anything, or they're really just updates or whatever, that's a little bit disappointing.
I think they.
It's yeah,
Yes. So I just did a little research because I kind of heard about it in the background. I didn't go to that camera, but I guess they have a 12K Ursa now. So
oh,
yeah.
nice.
So if you have tons of storage space and you have really heavy duty tripod because they're super big and heavy.
Oh, are they really?
Well, the Ursas just in general, they're just built like
Yep.
tanks and
Yep.
they're pretty big and heavy. I actually have one. I have a 4K though,
Okay.
but it's an older one and they pretty much haven't changed the design at all. It's kind of I feel it's a bit of a strange design, but it's really cool that they have a 12K because then you don't have to have any multiple cameras. You just have a 12K and then you can take slices out and just blow them up and have like a 5-person interview with just one camera.
Right. Right.
So
And really punch in when you want to.
yeah, so I probably should have maybe gone there and tried to interview somebody, but I was just running out of time. So I set for that particular area.
Yeah. No, that again, over the past year since we've not recorded, not a whole lot has been announced. I mean, there's been stuff here and there, right?
Yeah.
But there's nothing really that's been, what the DJI Ronin was probably the weirdest thing or biggest thing, whichever way you want to look at it. But
Uh-huh.
over the time that we weren't recording, seemed to be the most major thing that I had heard of.
Yeah.
But
There's
you
been
know,
for me, I think the biggest thing was the A7S3, which I actually
right.
got.
Sure.
Which I think is just a marvelous camera, and we should talk about it a little bit. But yeah, but in general, there wasn't anything earth-shattering or groundbreaking. The only thing is that now it seems like it's okay to put 10-bit recording into smaller cameras, smaller, less expensive cameras. That part is cool.
And being on board, right? On board
Yeah,
recording.
on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10-bit recording, and
Yeah.
that's kind of emerged in the last since COVID. Now it
Yeah.
seems like everybody's got that. First, it was just the GH5, and
Yeah.
then Sony did it with the A7S3, and then they're putting it in all their new A7S cameras, A7 cameras, like whatever the latest version is,
Right.
like A7R4s and the A7 IV have 10-bit video recording on them now. So anyway, that's
That's
one
cool.
thing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one thing that's gotten a little bit better in the last 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's get to Blackmagic and specifically DaVinci Resolve 18.
Okay.
You were able to speak to a gentleman by the name of Simon Hall, who is representing the company. And so let's talk to Simon, who is being talked to by the great Keith Moreau on behalf of TechMove at NAB 2022.
Test. Not too loud, right? Okay. So we're gonna. Maybe you can go back slightly. Yep. And we have a good view of the. Okay. So we're actually recording now, right? Okay. We're both equidistant. Hi, this is Keith Moreau from TechMove. We got time. Sorry. Let's start over. Simon. I was like clearing my throat. This is going to be edited, by the way. So.
That's good.
Hi, this is Keith Moreau from TechMove. We've got Simon Hall of Blackmagic here to talk about Resolve 18.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm good.
So Resolve 18, there's lots of kind of really cool new features. We've done a lot of work in the color page, and there's some real headline features in there that kind of defy logic, really. One thing we've done is something called the object mask. So what the object mask will allow you to do is just with a single stroke, it will allow you to select an object and mask it out so you could grade it separately. And what we've done is we've tried it on all sorts of things. So, on this we've tried it on a man riding a bike and a man on a horse and a car driving and flame. And so it's amazing. So, if you are doing a commercial and you nearly need to pick out your product from the background, you can just draw an object mask around it. Just sort of the contrast, so it really pops out from the screen and everything else can stay quite muted. Along with that, we've done something called a depth map. And again, like the object mask, it uses Resolve's AI, it uses the neural engine. And what the depth map will do is it will basically decide in your image sort of what's in the foreground and what's in the background. You can adjust it further yourself. But the amazing thing with this is if you've got a shot and you want to try and cheat depth of field because you don't have it in the shot, what the depth map will allow you to do is sort of keep everything in the foreground in focus, and then you can apply a blur to the background and then kind of get it to merge between the two. So, they're kind of sort of two of the new features that are sort of absolutely mind-blowing.
So that sounds really cool. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. So to me, when you talk about this and drawing masks and things like that, to me, and I've done this in the past with various editing software and other effects software, it's very tedious. It's rotoscoping, drawing, clicking a lot of dots, doing busy curves. And so explain, is there anything different about this process?
It's massively different because, as you say, if you had to mask something off before, as you say, you have to draw Bezier curves. Resolve's always had a great tracker in it. The cloud tracker would be able to track anything. But then, obviously, if you had things come in front of your mask, if you had something difficult to track or mask like a horse where you've got sort of four legs that kind of cross each other, you'd spend quite a long time trying to roto that. Whereas the object mask is literally, you can just draw a line and it will select the horse. Even if it doesn't quite get everything, you can just drag additional lines. So I found that sort of trying to rotoscope sort of complex shapes that might take me like 30 minutes, with the object mask it takes me about 2 minutes. So it's massively time saving for colorists that they don't really want to roto, but they do need to separate things in an image. So yeah, it's hugely time saving.
That's great. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is your optimization with the new architecture, the new hardware in the Mac products. The M1 products. I'm actually going to be getting one of those soon, so I'm kind of excited about that. Are you prepared to talk a little bit about that?
I can do. As I said, I'm not an Apple expert, but we've used the M1 machines before, and Resolve, we've always processed things through the GPU, but we process some things through the through the CPU. So it's great to have that unified memory. So if you want to use CPU, it'll send the memory one way, and then the GPU will send the memory the other way. So again, how it uses its resources is really beneficial for Resolve. But then also, obviously, the new M1 machines have a neural engine processor. So it has a processor specifically for AI, and DaVinci Resolve has a neural engine processor in it. So things like the object mask and the depth map use that AI. So on M1 machines, they have a natural acceleration because you have a processor processing those effects. So the speed increase is again quite incredible.
One of the things I've noticed just in looking at some of the reviews of speed, I'm just obsessed with how fast I can get things to work.
Yeah.
And one of one of the things I've actually used a competitor's editing software in the past.
Yeah.
That's my main go-to thing, and I'm starting to get kind of sick of how slow it is.
Okay.
and I know that DaVinci Resolve is very quick. I actually use it a lot of times for processing Blackmagic footage and other effects because it's so much faster.
Yeah.
But my only concern is how's the transition going to be from another NLE to Resolve?
I think for editing, it's a relatively straightforward transition because again I can show you, if I just click on this and open up the edit interface, you can see the interface is quite similar compared to other editing systems. I've used an array of editors. I started out using Final Cut Pro 2, the old version, which shows my age, and then said I've used Premiere, I've used Avid, I've used Final Cut 10, and sort of before I even worked for Blackmagic, when they introduced the edit page in Resolve 11, even in there, sort of getting into it, it became quite familiar. Obviously, there's been, I think, 8 different versions from then, and the editor now is just so slick, so efficient. I think for most people, the translation of skills is not that difficult. Sort of how you edit, I mean, again, if you use keyboard shortcuts, so your muscle memory is specific, you can change the keyboard shortcuts to something that you're more used to. But I think the fundamentals of editing, I would say is, if you've used a competitor, if you give yourself maybe a couple of days, I think after a couple of days, it'll become sort of second nature to you. I don't think it's a huge jump to move from one application to the other.
Okay, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to work on it for a couple weeks. I'm not even going to use this other software.
Okay.
I'm going to use your software, and I'll get back to you.
Okay, no worries. And again, if you want some help with this, if you take a look at our website, there's a load of videos on there to help you get started. We also have some training manuals that are free to download with some content. So again, at any point, if you're kind of going, how do I do this? You can just quickly download the PDF, give it a search. Said we've got footage on there as well. I'm sure you got your own footage. But again, if you want to give that a try, it's all on the website and it's all for free. There's no cost in that.
That's great. Okay, so you talked about the masking,
Yes.
which is a great feature of the new software. Talk about some of the other features that you particularly like in this new version.
There's quite a few. I mean, the one important thing, it's maybe not the sexiest thing in the world, but it's multi-layer subtitles. So, before what we had is we just had single layer subtitles. But obviously if you're doing audio description, so if you've got you and I talking in a scene and we're talking together and audio description, what you really need is kind of multi-layered subtitles. So we've enabled that in Resolve 18 now. And I said it's kind of said maybe not a headline thing, but it's so important for so many people, and people doing versioning in different languages. So that for me is kind of a really important thing. One of the other things I like is we've got a new despill filter, and it's just a really quick. So if you've done some green screen and you've got some spill light, you can just throw the despill on the color page, and it's really good. So if I've got a subject, I don't maybe have to grade them. I can just throw the despill on, and it gets a pretty good result straight away that I can then start grading. So for me, that's a kind of really quick 5 seconds, throw the despill on. It gets me very close to the result that I'm looking for. So again, it saves me time, means I can go home at the end of the day.
Are you prepared to show us a little bit of the keying and the despilling?
I can do. The one thing I say is these machines aren't the most powerful machines in the world, so it may be a little bit slow.
Okay. We could edit that and speed it up if you want to.
Speed it up. Okay. We could do that. So yeah, I mean, I think I did a little preempting of this. So as you can see, what I've done here is with the object mask, I need to do the object mask. So what I will do is I will add a node in here. And as you can see, in my interface now, I have an object mask tool. So what I'm going to do is, again, don't need to roto this out. What I can simply do is sort of draw a line. If I turn on my overlay, say my machine, as you can see, I get sort of a red outline around the person to say it's showing me this is what is masked. Now what I can do is if I do a track forwards, again, I won't said this machine, it'll take a little bit of time again, because this is a neural engine process, and these machines only have 16 gig of unified memory, so they need a little bit more memory in, but we can get the idea just from a sort of quick track in here. So as you can see, it is tracking through. Okay, I'll just stop that. So again, you can see it's done a little bit of tracking in there. So in essence, what I've got now is I've got, as you can see, I just drew one stroke. So now what I'd really like to do is maybe punch up the cyclist. So normally what I would do in this is I would add a node, and I can pipe the mask information from node 2 into node 3. And then using my curves, I can maybe, just as you can see, I can just adjust the contrast on here quite easily. So I can sort of make my cyclist stand out from the background. And then again, if I add what we call an outside node, which will reverse the matte, I can dial the contrast of the background back. So you can see I can really get that to stand out. And as you can see, if I just go into my object mask, you can see I've not had to rotate, whoopsie, just zoomed in a little bit. As you can see, I've not had to rotate that. It's done it all automatically. So you can imagine just how time-saving that is.
Can you feather the mask?
Absolutely. So within these controls in here, I've got a better option. So again, you can go into better, I can feather this, I can tweak the mask. Again, if I'll just show you an example here of, that, you know, if you have an area, sort of a big area like a pitch like this, I can obviously do the object mask. And then as you can see, it sort of doesn't quite pick up what it really needs to. So again, I can add bits to it. So I can add bits to the mask itself. And then, so anything that's red that's selected. And then if I want to try and take something away, oopsie, sorry, I keep hitting the magic mouse. So again, if I want to try and get rid of things, I can do that. But again, you can use it with your kind of other power windows. So for example, instead of me trying to chase the sky with this, what I can actually do is just put, you know, our rectangular power window over the sky. I'm just going to invert that. So now you can see with the object mask, it's just doing the pitch. So again, you can use it with things. And as I said, the objects it picks, it can do hair, it can do cars, it can do absolutely, well, we're telling people is give it a try, see what objects it'll pick up.
Exciting. I wish you the best of luck.
That's awesome. Tell me some of the other things you're excited about. Maybe we can demo some of those other things you're excited about.
I said we've got, I'm not quite sure about the project, but said the subtitles. Again, we've got quite a lot of stuff in Fusion because the depth map is put into Fusion. Admittedly, I'm possibly not the best person to speak about that. Matt, my colleague, is the best. And it's the same with Fairlight. We've done a lot around Fairlight about the ability to drop timelines into timelines. So if you've done mixers, you can sort of drop one mix into another mix, which, you know, for audio software is sort of unheard of. Again, my colleague Mary is the Fairlight expert, but she's sort of, she'd be the best person to speak to. But said again, if people want to do this, we've got release notes that list all the new features in Resolve. But yeah, it's exciting, and obviously linked with the Cloud Store and Blackmagic Cloud. You know, it's very exciting times at the moment.
Are you prepared to talk about the cloud?
I can be.
Is it okay? Since you're mentioning it, I personally, I'm not as interested in the cloud stuff because it's for collaboration, correct?
It is. Well, not strictly for collaboration. If you wanted to kind of maybe have a backup of your projects in a cloud, you could easily do that. But yeah, ideally it's designed for collaboration because obviously, you know, with the life that we've all led for the last 2 years, people were working remotely, and what Resolve has had for a long time is the ability to collaborate. And with Resolve, it's true collaboration. You can have multiple editors, audio engineers, colorists, visual effects artists all working in the same project at the same time. Admittedly, editors, you can't edit the same timeline at the same time, but it's great. So what an editor can do is build an edit, and then the VFX guy can go, just flag the shots that you need the VFX stuff on. He goes into Fusion, the editor can carry on working, but then at the same time, the editor's, the supervisor's gone, colorist start grading, editor, you make the changes. So it's all happening at the same time. So, and now what we've done is obviously that can now sit in the Blackmagic cloud. So these people don't have to they can look at the same project at the same time, but it just sits in the Blackmagic cloud, so they can be anywhere in the world. And then obviously that got us thinking is, well, the project doesn't contain any media. So what do you do about media? Now, again, with the Blackmagic Cloud, you can, if people have been working collaboratively and they share their media simply through like Google Drive, for example, they can carry on working that way. But what we did is we introduced Cloud Store. Now, Cloud Store is a very straightforward SAN system. It's a network hard drive. It's not tied into Resolve. You can actually use it with any system. So, you plug it into your network. It's got 4 10 gig ePorts on the back, and you can just sort of plug it into the network. So if you've got multiple users in one facility, you all just hook in and away you go. The clever bit about Cloud Store is you can sign into Dropbox with it. So what you can have is a Dropbox folder in Dropbox, somewhere in their cloud, and then when you load files onto our Cloud Store, it will upload the files to Dropbox. If somebody else has a Cloud Store somewhere else in the world and they're looking at they're signed in to the same Dropbox account and can see the same folder, any files that aren't stored on the Blackmagic Cloud Store, it'll automatically download from Dropbox. So in essence, what you're getting is incredibly powerful network drives. So they are NVMe N2 storage. So they're incredibly fast SSDs. So you can max out the 10 gigabits per second speed. But also as well, they sync up. So you can have 2 drives on, one here in Vegas, one in New York. And if I'm here in Vegas and I load some files on, it'll automatically download them in New York. And so, we've sort of thought about where the projects sit, but also how you can handle media as well.
So I assume there's no subscription fees. It's mostly having your hardware at the local system and then interacting with the cloud for downloading.
Yes, so obviously for media, the fee would you need a Dropbox account. For Blackmagic Cloud, to share your project library, it is a $5 a month fee. But just to clarify with that, is if you want to set up a project library and collaborate with everybody, if you set up the project library, you pay the $5, and then you just invite everybody else to join. They don't have to pay the $5, it's just you. Also, it's not a subscription model, so at any point, if any user goes, because we're a company that you probably get is we don't like to ring fence people. So at any point, if you decide that you don't like to, or you don't want to use the Blackmagic Cloud anymore, you want your projects out of it, very simply in Resolve, you can simply say, right, copy my project library from the cloud onto my local system, and you can just copy it down, and then you don't have to pay next month. So it's, yes, you have to pay for the service, but it's not a subscription model. You can drop off the payment at any point.
You mentioned the SAN or NAS device that you have that you've just come out with. What if you have your own non-Blackmagic NAS box? Okay. Does it interact with that?
No, it's just a basic SAN system. If you've got your own storage or your own network storage, then yes, it can interact with it because, admittedly, you can plug it into your network and it just appears like a hard drive. But any kind of syncing, any talking between the two boxes, it doesn't do that.
So I just want to give you a scenario. Suppose I already have a NAS or SAN connected to my local network. Yes. in my office. But I don't necessarily want to invest in the Blackmagic hardware, yeah. SAN or NAS hardware. What could I do with that system?
Oh, you can carry on using it. If you've got a shared system in your studio, Resolve will just see it as a hard drive. So you can absolutely carry on using that device, and you all hooking in your machines to that and sharing it. So yeah, Resolve will use any SAN or NAS system. Again, we have integration with some NAS systems like Edit Share and SNS because we've got panels that actually open with Resolve to interact with those systems. But yeah, if you are using your own NAS system on your network, Resolve will just see it as a hard drive and you can import material into it without a problem.
Okay. I'm not sure if I 100% get it, but some of the viewers out there might. So,
well, again, if people need more information, obviously they can see it on our website. Again, if you go into the company, there's a list of offices around the world where people can actually, if you've got any more questions, you can always email into one of those offices, and I'm sure there's somebody who'll be willing to help.
I wanted to ask you have a really interesting accent. Tell me where that comes from.
Okay, my accent is really, really weird. It's really weird. So I'm from Yorkshire. So in the UK, Yorkshire is a very, very kind of broad accent. But weirdly, I grew up in South Africa. So my dad was in the mining industry. So I grew up in South Africa. And then when we moved back to the UK, we lived in Sheffield, which was sort of less broad an accent. And then, I sort of lived for quite a long time in London, and now we live in a place in Cheshire, which is close to Manchester. That doesn't really have the Mancunian accent. It's kind of my accent is kind of a mishmash of different things from around the world. And again, when I'm speaking properly, it comes out more.
Well, it's been lovely interacting with you. Thanks for explaining all the different software and devices you have. This is Keith Moreau with TechMove interviewing Simon Hall of Blackmagic. Signing off for now. Thank you.
Welcome back to TechMove and the great interview that Keith Moreau was able to have with Simon Hall over at Blackmagic during our NAB 2022 coverage. Keith, really interesting DaVinci Resolve. I think I'm convinced. I think I'm going to 18. What do you think?
Going to 18. Yeah, I think you should go to 18 and then hopefully it won't crash.
Right. I've heard a lot of good things about it.
Yeah. No, I think it's fine. It's still beta though, so things might not be totally stable.
Yeah.
But I think that there's some incremental new features that probably works. It's probably more optimized for M1s, so you probably get better performance in certain situations. What's really interesting is a lot of people reporting that the Blackmagic, the DaVinci Resolve software is actually faster than Apple's even the latest release. They've actually optimized their software more than Apple.
You know what? I've heard the exact same thing, and it's really great to hear that. Right? That
it is. Good.
That Blackmagic's thing is performing so well on M1 Max that I guess Final Cut's going to have to kind of catch up with things, huh?
Yeah. Hopefully they'll be able to, because at this point, I don't know if there's that much of a reason to use Final Cut. I know it's really fast. The main thing before was like with Mac hardware, but now that DaVinci is faster than it, and it's I think more fully featured. I think the only thing is maybe there's not as much plugin as much like extra third-party software, but that would be the only thing.
Seems like people who use Resolve are really interested in the coloring aspect of it.
Oh,
and just how robust that feature is on its own. That everyone just loves Resolve just for that. And I think filmmakers like yourself have always had Resolve on their machine, at least just to color.
Yeah. I've used some of the coloring stuff and it's really awesome. And that software was originally super expensive to buy when it first came out. And then Blackmagic bought the company and then turned it into full-featured editing and effects software. So it's really cool what Blackmagic has done, and I'm looking forward to trying to see if I can switch and if I can actually do it. And hopefully this new Mac Studio will help me do that.
Oh yeah, I think that's why I think that we should both delve into the land of Resolve 18.
Yeah.
So I think that will be something that'll be exciting.
It'll be fun to talk about in future
It
recordings.
will be.
Yeah.
Especially when we can't find anything within the application that we wanted to do with it. So.
Yeah. Searching for hours to do something super simple. That's always the frustrating thing. Like, God, I used to do this in like half a second, and now I've taken 3 hours to do the simplest thing.
Right. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks for securing Simon Hall of Black Magic for us here. And let's take a little break here, and we'll come back with, I think, our final interview from NAB 2022. It is Rod and Keith coming at you from TechMove. Welcome back to TechMove and our 2022 NAB special. And we want to kick off this NAB celebration with the first interview that Keith was able to secure. And this is with the good folks over at Panasonic, who I personally love and adore. So, Keith, I'm so happy you met with the Panasonic folks. I know solely for me because of my just my fanboy love for Panasonic, and I'm grateful for that. Yes. Did you guys talk about or even see and play around with the GH6?
Yes, we saw it. We didn't really play around with it, but I got a huge. Pretty much the interview is all about the GH6. Nothing else really.
This is going to be so exciting for me. I really can't wait to hear this one. So, what was it hard to get into the Panasonic booth for this particular one, or just because you had been there like on day 3 and 4 or something? Well, it was pretty easy to secure an interview.
It was relatively easy. I was setting up, and I actually talked to somebody about who to talk to. You know, they have these kind of designated people that talk to press. Like not any Joe Schmo in the Panasonic booth is, I guess, authorized to talk to the press.
They don't let the guy from the Geek Squad at Best Buy talk to you about the Panasonic GH6. They don't let that guy talk.
No,
because they talk. Those guys talk to me. You know.
No guy would not talk. Would not talk. Not qualified. Not qualified to do much, including whatever their job is. Just as an aside, I was helping this kind of friend hook up it's kind of cool. It's like a mirror. Okay, we're totally off subject, but it's funny. It was like this mirror that had you could put a monitor inside it. So when the monitor is off or when the TV is off, it's like a mirror.
Oh, okay.
And then when you turn the TV on, the light comes through. It's like a one-way mirror. So the light comes through, and then you can use it as a TV. But just when it's on the wall, it doesn't look like a TV. It looks like a mirror.
It's kind of like those wall-hanging home gym things, like the Tonal or those other exercise things.
I guess I don't.
Yeah.
I guess
no,
that's
all right. totally off topic, but you know what?
But anyway, a Geek Squad person had put this in and mounted it to the wall because it was pretty heavy. The mirror and everything, and the monitor inside it was heavy.
Sure.
So I talked to the lady, my friend. Like they put it in the studs, right? Like this thing is solid, right? It's not gonna like fall out. And they said, yeah, the Geek Squad guy said yeah, it's in the studs. It's really solid. So. Anyway, so it had been on the wall already mounted, but just the mirror part, not the monitor part. So I helped her stick in the monitor and hooked it up and stuff, and then it was all working and everything was great. And then like about 15 seconds, admiring it, just tore off the wall and almost like smashed on my foot and cut my foot off. I was like I dodged out of the way of this careening mirror monitor. Did it
make a horrific sound too? Did it make a horrific sound? Just
like a big bash onto it. Luckily, it was carpet. And there was just
nothing
all this.
Broke. Nothing broke.
I think the monitor. Well, yeah, the wall broke, but the monitor was good. I think we tested it. But yeah, there's this big gigantic, and they didn't put in the studs. They just put it on drywall. This thing's like 100 pounds. They just had these little drywall anchors holding it in.
Well, and that's our endorsement for the Geek Squad, ladies and gentlemen. So again, welcome to NEB 2022.
So no, the Geek Squad guy did not talk to me, and if he did, I would just run away.
Right.
But this other really nice person, rep from Panasonic, not the usual guy who was also there, but he wasn't there at that time. But it was this new person who you have the name of, was really nice and interesting, and he really knew a lot about this camera, and the camera's pretty cool.
I'm excited to hear about it. So let's do this. Let's get off the Geek Squad train and let's transfer over to the Panasonic jet fighter that we all know and love as the GH6. Let's talk to Sean Robinson of Panasonic, who gets to talk with our very own man on the street, Keith Moreau, as we continue our coverage of NAB 2022. And let's go ahead and turn over to Keith and Sean right here on TechMove.
So this is Keith Moreau with TechMove. We've got Sean Robinson of Panasonic here, and he's going to explain all about the new GH6 and why it's a big step up from the GH5 and 5S. Hi, Sean.
Hey, how's it going? So we've got the brand new GH6 on display here at NAB, and there's a lot of really cool stuff about this for pretty much every aspect of how people had used the GH5. So photographers, there's a lot to love about this. Videographers is a ton, and even all the way up into pro cinematographers. There's so much in this. It's kind of starting right at the top. It's a brand new sensor, brand new processor, 25 megapixels. So we've had an increase in micro four thirds. We finally broke that 20 megapixel barrier. And that affords us a ton of really unique things that we can do for the video side and also for the photography side. Namingly those is that we can do 5.8K open gate recording in the 4:3 aspect ratio. And actually, during the show, that's been one of the highlight things that a lot of people are starting to really latch on to this concept of.
So just to clarify, open gate, I know what it is, but you can clarify it to the viewers.
Yeah, so open gate recording basically means that unlike traditional recording with video cameras or photography cameras that are now used for video, instead of recording in a 16:9 or a 17:9 aspect ratio and being locked into that ratio, you're using the entire area that the sensor in the camera is able to give you. So in our case with the GH6, it's a 4:3 aspect ratio sensor. So traditionally, you just crop out the top and bottom, and you're not using them for image capture. So we looked at this and said, well, the anamorphic side, so the higher end productions where you want all those flares and all that fun stuff, they've been using that aspect ratio to capture. Well, we can throw a spherical lens, a standard lens on this, record that full area of the sensor that's available so that you can then just bring it into post and crop your framing later. In the pro side, we've done this forever where you know that you want to be able to stabilize the shot in post, or you want to be able to shift your frame up and down. Now we're just really making a much bigger deal of it now with the GH6 because of the way the industry has changed. In the pro side, they use it for very specific reasons, anamorphic, like I said, or pan scan, things like that. But in the non-cinema side, so event videographers, real estate, commercial videography, filmmaking, things like that, it actually now becomes an incredibly useful tool for situations where the client is now asking you, hey, I want my 9:16 so I can put it on a display, but I also want a 16 by, I did that backwards. I want a 16:9 for a horizontal display, but I also want a 9:16 crop because I want to use it for advertising on social platforms. I want to be able to do a 5:4 because I want to fill an Instagram feed with the content that we're shooting. So what we did basically to support that is enable shooting open gate with a ton of different frame masks on the system. So you shoot it once, and now the deliverable that you have is higher resolution than 4K, so you're 5.8K in the vertical and horizontal. So your vertical crops are no longer cropped out of a 16 by 9. It's surprising that it's taken this long for the mass side of the industry to actually kind of think to shoot this way, since cinema's been shooting that way for a while. But yeah, we've just kind of dove head in on this to really just provide the best tool that we can for filmmakers of all levels. On top of that, which obviously the 5.8K, you can tell I'm a little excited about it. On top of that, it's that we've added 4K 120 native resolution in this camera. So you're getting actually 120 frames per second in 4K with focus and audio. You have full HD up to 240 frames per second in the camera. Again, native frame rates. Variable frame rate up to 300 frames per second. So you get pre-slowed down footage in that area. We also add things like 48 frames per second in the camera as a native codec. So all the wedding videographers and event videographers that want to shoot on a 24p timeline and have, bits of slow motion ramps done in it, you've got an actual true 48 frame for an actual 50% slowdown. Further than that, we also made it even better for production side. We now have the ability to do internal ProRes recording, so 422 HQ and 422. At launch, the camera does the 5.7K at up to 30 frames per second. With firmware update that should be coming out shortly, we're going to be adding full HD and DCI options. So you'll have a really solid mix of ProRes support within this camera. What else? We will be adding firmware update that brings USB SSD recording. So knowing that CF Express cards are still a little pricey, you'll have an option to go to the much more cost-effective storage like an SSD to record to. We're also adding 4K 120 frames per second video out over over HDMI, and 4K raw data out over HDMI to like a Ninja 5 Plus if you want to work in the raw workflow. Yeah, it's insane how much stuff is in this. And that's not even talking about the new sensor design that's in here. We use a brand new sensor that uses a technology that we call dynamic range boost, which takes a single frame or single image off the sensor, processes that image twice through a high gain and a low gain circuit, and combines them in real time up to 60 frames per second. And what we get out of that is an extra stop to a stop and a half of highlight dynamic range brought back in a camera. So even though we're going up higher in resolution, which typically is thought of as losing dynamic range and increasing noise, we're able to actually increase dynamic range by doing this. Yeah, so so excited about this camera. I'm so happy that it's finally out and we can be talking about it and showing people here at the show.
It's great. So I got the GH5, which I love. I love the stabilization on it. It's almost gimbal-like, even just using it without a gimbal. And then I got the GH5S for the lower light. Mm-hmm. And tell me, if I get this, mm-hmm. or if our audience members consider this and they already have similar cameras like what I have, what are they going to get more out of it than what they have now?
Okay. Yeah, so if you're coming from a GH5, that camera was rated at 5 stops of stabilization for the IBIS system. And we do have our dual IS system, so you carry 5 stops out, a little more telephoto if you're using our lenses. The GH6 has 7.5 stops now. So if you thought the GH5 was good at stabilization, this is in another league now. So there's been huge improvements in that side. If you're coming from a GH5S, this is where it gets actually a little more, not complicated, but a little bit more of a, you kind of want to really look and make a decision. The GH5S is still going to be better in low light in certain circumstances. It's a lower resolution, larger pixels, so you get inherently more ability to capture light in lower light situations. But the GH6 has the benefit of shooting at a higher resolution and downsampling that image. So in most cases, it can negate the benefit you're getting from doing a lower resolution sensor because you're doing that in downscaling. When you start getting into the really high ISOs, like ridiculous high ISOs, like Sasquatch is over there and I want to capture it, that's where a GH5S is still going to give you a better looking image. But then the other trade-off there is GH5S does not have stabilization. This does. If you're working in a situation where the stabilizer is actually something that could be a negative for your deployment, so mounting it to a car or something like that, this may not be the best choice for that particular situation. That's where the GH5S or things like our BGH1 may be better options for you. But the point is with a lot of our cameras is that we're making alternatives in these categories so that you've got the right tool for the right job. You don't have to shoehorn a camera into your particular shooting style unless you really want to, because you want the latest and greatest. I mean, the latest and greatest is awesome. Definitely go get the latest and greatest. But, yeah, so between all three of them, it really just comes down to if you're a GH5 user and you want production simplicity, you want to make it much easier as you're going through the entire production scale, the GH6 is the perfect camera for that. If you're a GH5S user and you want better low light, but you miss that the down sampling that you get the sharper looking footage, you want maybe a stabilizer, then this is still a perfect camera for you. So yeah, lots of cool stuff.
So my takeaway is it's a little more versatile. You're combining some of the features of both the older cameras plus a better resolution and probably better ergonomics. I'm noticing the LCD screen is a little more versatile.
Yeah, so we listened to a ton of feedback from users about the very simple point of if I want to open my screen and I have a monitor attached or headphones, I can't rotate it any further than this. And when it's closed, and like this is a small rig cage that we have it set up as, yeah, you still have challenges here. But what we did is we took the screen design from the S1H and put it in here, so now I have full access to rotate, have my ability to actually get a better stance if I'm trying to hold the camera steady. But more on that, we also have the ability to open the back up and keep the actual screen in line with the sensor plane or with the image plane. So for users that having a screen out to the side has been kind of an annoyance, you now have your tilt. For those of us that are annoyed that have, you're knocking into your ports here, we fixed that too. This also is what allows us to deploy our active cooling solution. So like the or the S1H, this is an actively cooled camera, so there is a fan built in here. That's what allows us to do unlimited recording, and we test our cameras up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. And if they can hit that and unlimited record and not stop on you, they get the badge of approval of unlimited recording. And on top of that also, it's still fully weather resistant. So even though we have an active cooling solution in here, we don't compromise reliability just to be able to hit an unlimited recording thing. You take this camera out pretty much anywhere in the world and you're gonna be perfectly fine with it. It's gonna just work like a tank, like the original GH5s have been doing for going on 6 years now, something like that.
Great stuff. So when this came out, I wasn't super excited about it because I thought, well, what's different from the cameras I already have? And also, to be honest with you, I have other brand cameras, and the full frame versions of those cameras have been out for a while, and so I have a kind of a lot of different brands.
Yeah.
And so but I do like the Micro Four Thirds series for the fact that you can have a much smaller package and get better telephoto performance out of it. Maybe you can explain from your point of view what the advantage of that is.
Yeah, so there's that side of it where if you're someone who needs to be able to shoot much longer distances, you want further reach for your field of view, Micro Four Thirds inherently, because the sensor is it's a quarter of the size of full frame, which means it's a 2 times crop, you have the ability to have lenses like a 100 to 400 that are only this big. Which in 35 millimeter field of view is a 200 to 800, right? Right. Yeah, I did my math right. It's been a long show. So that's 200 to 800 millimeter field of view. So that's ridiculously long reach.
And the lenses on those full frame cameras are like, they're huge.
Yeah, and the big difference there is that a lens this big that weighs, maybe like a pound to a pound and a half versus a lens that's weighing like 13 pounds to do the same amount of reach, and typically the same aperture values, or roughly about the same depth of field values. You're in a kit that you can actually now legitimately just carry in a side bag or a backpack. But there's also other benefits too with the smaller sensor and working in this. So in a number of situations where you're filming, even though there's the trend online now to be doing everything in ultra shallow depth of field, a lot of times if you're doing corporate work or you're a one-person operation, you also want to be able to know, like, all right, I'm doing a talking heads piece. I want to make sure that my subject is in focus from here to just behind the back of the head, or just, in front and back, because that person tends to sway. Well, Micro Four Thirds is one of those systems that means that I can shoot that at f2.8, have the depth of field equivalent of f4, which is my normal here, and shoot at a lower ISO. So when I go to full frame to do that, I have to gain up my system to shoot at f4 to get the same general look out of the image. And those systems, the lenses, the cameras themselves have gotten smaller. I mean, our S5 is actually a little bit smaller than the GH6. So the trade-off there being that your kit now becomes much bigger. So which is it that you end up really wanting to do? So the Micro Four Thirds platform really just gives you tons of that flexibility to put it in scenarios that fit best for your style. And that's not even scratching the point that Micro Four Thirds is a system that the sensors read out faster, so less rolling shutter. The cool stuff like the open gate, that when you get into full frame, rolling shutter becomes a more apparent issue. It's one of the most adaptable lens mounts in the industry. So you need something. A Micro Four Thirds camera like the GH6 is going to be able to fit it and be the tool for you.
Great stuff. Okay, so you mentioned one thing, talking about depth of field, etc., and talking about focusing. So focusing on a plethora of cameras, autofocusing has become, in the past it was like, oh, pros don't use autofocus. But now it's almost like pros are starting to appreciate autofocus because it makes their job a little bit easier. So tell me about some of the autofocus features of this. In my opinion, it was one of the drawbacks compared to some of the other brands. Maybe it's improved, or maybe there's still some considerations. So talk a little bit about autofocus on the new cameras.
Yeah, sure. So the GH6 is still using the depth from defocus, so it's our DFD system. It is a contrast-based system, and that was a very deliberate choice with the GH6. When we launched this camera, my counterpart, Matt Fraser, and I did address this at the launch, that we understand everyone wants phase in the cameras. That's not falling on deaf ears. And it is being investigated. Our teams are looking at how to deploy phase detect into the cameras, whether or not it's something that's viable with our image quality targets, and then kind of moving from there. The biggest thing right now is, and the reason this camera doesn't have it, is one, camera development starts typically right around the time when the previous model is released. So this camera's been in development for a very long time. We're using an incredibly unique sensor in this camera. Totally brand new, totally new Venus engine processor that we use. And the decision had to be made basically that our image quality targets, our dynamic range targets, our color science, just the way our image looks, can it be done with phase detect pixels on the sensor, or do they cause negative impact to image quality? And our decision at that time was, we want the image quality. That's our target for this. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. It is being evaluated. We are looking at phase detect into cameras. Does it make sense? Can we do it? Will it meet what our expectations are for a product? So yeah, it really, at that point, it's about the feedback from users. The more we get feedback from everybody, but constructive feedback, not just put phase in it, Yeah, like phase has its own challenges and its own negatives as well.
I would assume that the phase detect requires the pixels to be of a certain quality and certain size. Maybe because you have to have a couple pixels. I don't know the exact technology, but I think it's because you have a couple pixels per pixel site. and when everything's shrinking down, it becomes more complex to get the same image quality. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, with any phase array that gets put on a sensor, it has to be masked out from the image because those pixels are not capturing image data. So the more pixels you put in there, the more processing you have to do to mask them out. I like using the analogy of if you open up Photoshop and use content aware to remove something from a frame, sometimes it looks great, sometimes it looks like the worst thing you've ever seen. Similar kind of concept. You have to be able to get rid of them and have image data there. And it's a destructive process in the image pipeline. And I'm not to make excuses as to why it's not done, but the current deployments are not up to what our image quality standards are. So until we can come to a solution that does that, we're working with the with the DFD system in here. But that being said, compared to a GH5, if you're coming from an original GH5, this is light years ahead of the original GH5.
So I'm going to get better autofocus out of the GH6.
Correct. Now, our system does take time to learn. We have posted guides online that explain what the menu options do, how the AF custom settings work for tweaking things like sensitivity and speed and motion prediction and stuff, depending on the way you're using the camera. So we have tons of resources that we have released out there to kind of help users understand how the system works, what the settings do. But what I can tell you is that for a number of styles of shooting, the AF in this camera is vastly improved compared to our own cameras.
Got it.
We won't make comments about, compared to others. We let all of you make those decisions. So,
well, this is great. Okay, so now we're going to go to the Sean side of the interview. I couldn't help but notice some of the interesting tattoos you have.
Yes.
Talk about them.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I come from a photo background. I went to college for photography, studio photography, and I've just loved the industry forever. And when I had the opportunity, because a cousin of mine was a tattoo artist, I could get free tattoos. I decided to do a lot of photo and film oriented stuff. So, Aperture and film, because you got to love film if you're really in this industry. Not really. If you're starting now and you never shot on film, that's cool. Aperture and film, and then I love the engineering designs between optics. So what is actually how these lenses are constructed, what makes up the different elements in the groups. So knowing that one, which makes this even crazier, that I've been able to see these optics designs, and they're available online. You can see them. These are actually our Leica design co-branded lenses that Lumix makes. So these aren't just generic lens designs. So this is the 42.5 Nocticron. I may get these wrong because it's been a little while. This is either the 42.5 Nocticron or the 12 millimeter Summilux. This is 100%. This is the 15 millimeter Summilux. And then this is I'm fairly certain this is the 12 millimeter 1.4 Summilux. And yeah, they're my favorite focal lengths that I work with. Whether I'm in the Micro Four Thirds or I'm shooting in full frame, I typically like shooting at like a 24, a 30, 35, or an 85 millimeter. And yeah, I just loved the way they look. And they're conversation starters. I like talking to people. So when I get someone that comes up and says, "Hey, is that like a deconstructed hamburger?" it ends up like being a really cool conversation, and people don't really necessarily know what they are. Or I get, "Is that shawarma or shish kebabs?" and all that stuff, and it's like, no, they're lenses. And yeah, it's fun stuff. I love this industry, and I love doing what I can to support it, and I show it every day.
That's really cool. I think that's a good time to end the interview. So thanks a lot, Sean, so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming over.
This is Keith Moreau for TechMove. Thank you.
That is Sean Robinson, along with our very own Keith Moreau and the Panasonic booth, of course, at NAB 2022. And man, that GH6, that sounds fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of hype, right? I mean, even before NAB, even before you and I talked about it, it's been out for a little while, right? It's been out for a little while now.
Yeah, I guess a couple months.
a couple months or so,
Yeah.
and a lot of general reviews and a lot of improvements to the thing. Keith, let me get your opinion of what you saw, what you heard. What do you think about the GH6?
The GH6, it looks pretty cool, and after this interview, I probably will get one, just because it's a bit more advanced than G. It's not like light years above it,
Right.
but it's got incremental improvements in different areas that we heard in the interview, and so it's probably worthy of getting. If you're gonna, I have a bunch of lenses, my now, partially to support some of the Blackmagic Micro Four Thirds cameras, but all camera series, and so I think it's a worthy upgrade just to keep current, because the GH5 is pretty old now. It's like several years old,
isn't it?
so
Yeah, right.
So, and I think that the only thing that I would have loved, and I talked about in the review, would have had the dual pixel autofocus, or the non-contrast based autofocus, which they're still using. And so, because autofocus is it's getting really, really good in the Sonys and the Canons these days, like super good. Like, you don't have to worry about it so much.
Yep.
But you still have to worry about it a little bit with the GH series still. But maybe in the future they'll come out with it. I think there's just some limitations with physics and just how small the sensor is. That's part of it. So.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that I've been hearing on some of the reviews is that contrast-based autofocus.
Yeah.
And it's just, everyone says that it's improved, but it's still not, like everyone else's just yet.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's about technology.
Yeah. But so I actually I still have GH5. I have a GH5S. One of the things that was kind of interesting is that my GH5 might be obsolete, but my GH5S is not yet obsolete, because it it still has better low light than the GH6. So
right. It does.
Yeah, but it has less features. It doesn't have the in-body stabilization and some other things like that. So
right.
So it's not it's not as advanced, but it's still a little bit better in low light. So I probably still use it as if I have a tripod set up and I don't care about stabilization, I'll probably still use the GH5S. And then I'll probably sell my GH5. So if you want a good deal,
I'll be sure to contact you.
Yeah. And then I also have another GH4, and then I have a GH1. And recently I wanted to sell some of my old gear.
Yeah.
Because all it's doing is just like taking up space.
Right.
So I actually got a quote from BH Photo, which actually is pretty good for buying used gear.
Okay.
And they were willing to give me $5 for all of my GH cameras. So
$5?
No, more than that, but it was pretty low.
Right. Like it would have cost more to ship it to them than to get the money back from them.
Oh, they include free shipping, so they give you.
Oh, well, that's very kind.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very kind of them.
So yeah.
No, that's really great.
But
fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Well, hey, thanks to Sean Robinson over at Panasonic for giving us the time, and thank you, Keith, for that update of the GH6. Yes. Looking forward to your TechMove review when you finally get that camera in your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be interested to hear what you think about that. But that's fantastic. Okay, let's do this. We're going to take another break, and then we're going to come back with our next interview from NAB, and we'll be right back here on TechMove. Welcome back to TechMove, and it is the great Rod Louie along with the great Keith Moreau. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to apologize because I don't know if you've been noticing throughout some of the recording or not here, but we might be having some slight audio issues. And, TechMove has been one of our biggest prideful moments is delivering you audio file type quality here. And when something is a little bit subpar for us, we usually end up like trying to slice our wrists after the shows. So with this, we want to kind of like do a little explanation as to why we think we might be having some audio problems. Like, who knows? Maybe right now as I'm talking, I might be dropping out. I might be something like that. Which was pretty good, right? You thought there was a problem, right, Keith? You thought that was a problem.
I was scared for a second.
But there might be an issue. So let us give you a little bit of a background, ladies and gentlemen. Keith and I are recording right now off of brand new Mac Studios. Now, it was either in our intro or our last episode where I had gotten my Mac Studio, but Keith was waiting on his, and he was and he had gotten his, but is now actually using it. So, Keith, I'm going to let you kind of like give a little explanation on what our new setup is, because let me just kind of set this stage a little bit here. Nothing works that we used to use on an M1 chip. Okay, so nothing works. So we essentially have to start TechMove from scratch all over again. So, Keith, take it away. Let the listening audience know the absolute travesty of TechMove right now.
Okay, so back 10 years ago when we started almost 10 years. Or about 10 years that we started.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and we'd spent about 6 months testing out recordings and making sure that we'd have a reliable system. And initially, it was just a bunch of jury-rigged different pieces of software to get it to record. And it was
really awful. It was really awful.
Yeah. So one of our aims was to not use the potentially poor quality of Skype to actually record the audio. So what we tried to do is record each person's audio locally with a really high quality recording, and then later in post I would combine the two. So Rod would actually send me his pretty large file that he'd recorded locally of his voice, Skype track of my voice, and then I would take my version, which had my local good quality, and then his Skype version, and combine. And when we did the actual TechMove episode, it only had the two goo rings in it. And that worked for years, and we used this software called Call Recorder from this Ecamm. But that's 10 years ago, and it's kind of amazing they're still in business. Companies come and go, but I guess they just finally got fed up with Mac OSs and different Skypes that were coming out, and everything would break. When one was updated, it would break it, and they'd have to come up. And we're using software that we just paid once for. I don't know how much it was, maybe $30 or something 10 years ago. And they're still fixing stuff for us.
I could see why now they wouldn't want to do anything with an M1 chip now. So
yeah, or for any of their customers.
Yep.
So so they just basically said, sorry, we're done for this product. And so then Rod and I had to figure out how to record. Record on the new operating systems and the new Macs, the new M1 Macs. So we experimented a little bit, and there's this software that I use all the time called Audio Hijack, which is awesome audio software that can record pretty much any application that's producing audio on your Mac. So there's a way to record Skype, and there's a way to do something exactly what we wanted to do. So to test last week, and it seemed to come out fine. And then I'm One Studio for the first day, and I did a little test. It seemed like it was okay. Monitoring is still weird because it's combining my local clean audio with Skype's audio, and so I'm getting an echo effect, which is really hard to listen to when I'm recording and talking. So I'm actually just taking one of my headphones off. I only have Rod in my I'm hearing myself just out of my normal ear without the headphones. So that's kind of working, but then we're also noticing that Rod's dropping out on the Skype recording. Rod doesn't have Audio Hijack yet, so he's not doing his local copy. So the actual final recording of this episode is my local audio, which probably sounds pretty clean, and then Rod's Skype audio, which is audio dropping out occasionally because I hear dropouts when I'm listening to Rod. And not sure if it's Skype, because Skype didn't used to drop out that much before, or maybe I think it's more the combination with Audio Hijack. And maybe it's something simple like some audio extension that needs to be updated that I haven't put in my system because I just did this today. It's all last minute. Not a good way to operate, but we're kind of on a time crunch, so we had to get it working. So, and I've just had a super busy week. Just didn't even have a moment to test this stuff. I actually just loaded my Mac Studio up today and started testing it. Which I'd kind of tested with the Mac Mini before to see if things would work with an M1, but this is the first time I've actually tested my Mac Studio with my 5 monitors, which finally worked, and my 20-something hard drives with different weird Thunderbolt pieces, and got it all to kind of work about half an hour before our recording session. And then
which is tremendous, right? And also on my side of the fence, even though I'm not really doing anything, something that Keith and I have noticed, well, I have because I told him about it, is that on his Skype call that I am on, every so often a digital repeat kind of happens. So like, for instance, I'll just that last exchange, Keith went, Thunderbolt. So, it's almost like that. Will, danger. I mean, it's very much like that. So, if that won't send us over the edge, I don't know what will. So, you know what? Kudos to the Mac Studio, because this never happened before with our Intel Macs. So,
Yes, we thought it would make everything better and faster, and it's made it slower and worse. So, thank you, Apple Mac Studio.
Right. And we're still waiting for Keith's Ultra Mac Studio.
The Ultra will probably be even worse. It'll repeat me like 300 times.
Like $6,000 more. We'll be able to get a recording that just has nothing but repeats on it. It's so tremendous. Anyway, so folks, because of that, we're going to spare you the horrifying sounds of us dropping out and all this kind of stuff. So we're gonna kind of end this podcast a little bit sooner than we normally would. So we just want to let you know that please forgive us. During our next recording, we'll have it much more together. We will probably have to get back the iMac that I'd given away. I'll pull that back from the garage, and Keith will probably pull out
I'll be digging up my Mac 2C from 1985.
his Macintosh Cube that glows blue. So he'll get that one. But hey, anyway, before we close out, Keith, thanks so much for heading over to NAB and talking to a lot of our old friends from Panasonic, Blackmagic, and Aperture. That was really great. So really appreciate that. And we're glad that you made it back safely. We're glad that you were able to at least catch a couple of days of NAB, because it's always great to be able to see and hear about some of the new stuff that's coming out.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome, Rod. It was actually fun, and it's fun to be back recording with you.
Yeah, it's great. Now all we have to do is figure out how to record. Anyway, Keith, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we want you, I'd go through the whole list of how you can contact us, but I'm afraid I might drop out and you won't be able to hear a thing. But, it's the usual Facebook, how else do we, I don't even remember now.
It's just all the ways.
All the ways, just do a web search for the greatest podcast in the universe. And
longest running audiovisual Mac cinematography podcast.
the longest running podcast about cinematography that still barely has 50 episodes under its belt. So anyway, this has been fun. I have been Rod Louie, and with me has been Keith Moreau. And we want to thank you for joining us here. And we'll catch you on the next round of TechMove. See ya.